What is the difference between an informal hearing with the Illinois Secretary of State and a formal hearing? My name is Michael Young. I've been a lawyer for over 25 years, and let me explain the differences. First of all, the availability. With an informal hearing, there's 26 locations throughout Illinois where you can have an informal hearing. Most Secretary of State facilities have an informal hearing officer present, and you can go there to get an informal hearing. There's no appointment that's necessary, and there's no fee. It's a first come, first serve basis. But not every Secretary of State location has an informal hearing officer. So you want to make sure before you go that there actually is an informal hearing officer on location. They usually only have one informal hearing officer at a location. So if that person's out sick or on vacation, you're going to show up and they're not going to be there. So it's best to call on the day of, the day that you're expected to have a hearing, to make sure that that hearing officer is working that day. But when you get there, it's first come, first serve, and you take a number if there's a wait, and you meet with the hearing officer. And the hearing officer, typically what the hearing is going to be you and the hearing officer. And if you have an attorney present, some people show up with attorneys, it'll be the attorney, yourself, and the hearing officer. Now, a formal hearing, on the other hand, is something that you need to schedule. There's only 5 locations in the state of Illinois where you can have a formal hearing. And of those locations, you need to send in a request ahead of time, and it takes approximately 6 weeks to get a hearing date, 6 to 8 weeks to get a hearing date. You also have to pay for that hearing. It's $50. So when you send in a request saying, can I please schedule me for a hearing, you need to send a non-refundable $50 payment. And when you do that, they will then send you a response saying this is where you will have your hearing. In your request for the formal hearing, you can select what location you want to have this hearing at. They don't just randomly assign it. Now, at a formal hearing, it's not simply you and the hearing officer. The Secretary of State also has an attorney in the room who is a representative of the Secretary of State. So it's the hearing officer, it's the attorney for the Secretary of State, and it's yourself. And if you have an attorney, it will be your attorney also. The purpose of the Secretary of State attorney in the room is to ask you questions, or to basically stop you from getting a driver's license. Their job is to ask you questions that, frankly, are just going to trip you up. A lot of people hire an attorney to do a formal hearing and informal because the questions they ask you, and there's over 150 possible questions, most people, frankly, answer wrong when they go in. But when you have an attorney, the attorney will walk you through it and explain, well, this, you want to say yes here, but the answer is no, and so forth. But in any event, that's the initial differences between an informal and formal hearing. Now, another factor is you can pick what hearing officer you want in an informal hearing. You may know that this one hearing officer is at this one location, and when you go there, you're expected to see this one hearing officer. Whereas a formal hearing, they don't let you know who the hearing officer is. They have different hearing officers that rotate, and you can't pick who you want as a hearing officer. And this is another safeguard that the Secretary of State puts in so that attorneys perhaps don't go to their favorite hearing officer over and over and over again, and that's a possibility with informal hearings. Now, whether or not you need an informal hearing or a formal hearing depends on your driving record. If you have a DUI, if you have multiple DUIs, it's going to be a formal hearing. If it's a very serious using the motor vehicle in the commission of a felony, that may also be a formal hearing. But Most other hearings are informal. The way to figure out if you need a formal hearing or an informal hearing is you could call the Secretary of State, the Springfield office, and ask for the hearings department and ask them, do I need an informal or formal hearing? And they should be able to tell you. A lot of times they will kind of get rid of you by saying, well, go to an informal hearing officer and ask them if you need a formal or informal hearing. Also, I'm not trying to recruit people to hire an attorney, but a lot of these cases are very complicated and people don't get their license back unless they hire an attorney who is competent at doing these hearings, because there's a lot of information that needs to be provided and questions asked that someone without having this inside knowledge, you may not get through the process very easily or at all. If you have any questions, I have my contact information after this video, and thanks for watching.